Right now, we any closer to a deal? Well, it seems as both Republicans and Democrats may be softening just a little bit. So does that mean we avoid that cliff come 12/31? We'll talk to Congresswoman Nita Lowey about that and much more. And later, Surveillance Nation. You may not realize it, but almost every aspect of your life, it's become public and accessible at a moment's notice. Tonight is the first part of our special presentation about privacy in the digital age. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us this Monday evening, December 10th. Now, as I said, by the math, we're just 21 days from that dreaded fiscal cliff, slope, whatever you want to call it. And guess what? We may actually be moving or inching closer to a deal. It may just be optics, but the president, he was back on the road today selling his plan at a campaign-style stop at an auto plant just outside of Detroit. Meanwhile, in D.C., Republicans and Democrats remain far from a deal, but Sunday, a slight ray of hope as President Obama and House Speaker John Boehner met face-to-face for the first time in nearly a month. Neither side would offer any substantive details from the discussion, but a spokesperson for the Republican leader said Boehner didn't back down his offer to the White House last week, still the GOP's position in the fiscal cliff talks. That plan offers a total of $2.2 trillion in deficit reduction over the next decade, including $800 billion in new tax revenue, but no increases on the top 2% of taxpayers. But this Sunday, we saw some softening from both sides. Some Republicans signaling that they might be ready to compromise when it comes to those tax hikes for the top 2%.
There is a growing group of folks that are looking at this and realizing that we don't have a lot of cards as it relates to the tax issue.
Will I accept a tax increase as a part of a deal to actually solve our problems? Yes.
Senator Corker and Senator Coburn, two vocal Republicans. So why the compromising words? Well, it seems that the White House moderated some of the demands, at least a little bit. The president says tax rates for the wealthy, they have to rise, but now word is the actual rate could be kind of negotiable, maybe not 39.6 for the top end. Then the two parties seem to be moving closer when it comes to entitlements, with one leading Democrat embracing a way to cut Medicare costs. It's called means testing, meaning that those who have more, a lot more, would have to pay more for Medicare.
I do believe there should be means testing, and those of us with a higher income and retirement should pay more. That could be part of the solution.
Now, if D.C. can't strike a deal by the end of the year, as we say, automatic spending cuts will go into effect and every American will see a tax hike. So, are we close enough to a deal that we could avoid this cliff here? Let's bring in our panel on this. Gian-Carlo, former advisor to both Presidents Bush, Jr. and Sr., Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and so much more, and Representative Nita Lowey, newly selected ranking Democrat on the House Appropriations Committee. We'll talk about that in a second. And Richard Brodsky, chief troublemaker, as well as former New York Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos, professor at NYU, and so much. All right, Congresswoman, let me ask you, when you read between the lines, the very fact that the same press release came from Speaker Boehner and President Obama, and the fact that it's just the two of them in a room rather than a whole cackle, it leads you to believe that they know what the deal is going to look like at the end. They're negotiating the margins. Do I have it?
You always do. You're so wise.
Thank you so much.
Frankly, I've been going down to Washington after the election every week. And it's usually 2 days a week. The Republicans have almost nothing on the agenda. So I know Speaker Boehner is hearing from his people. I don't want to be here for Christmas, and no one else wants to be here for Christmas. I'm celebrating Hanukkah now, but I'm sure.
So it's all right with you.
But I know
well,
most
you guys
of
got
our.
crazy nights here, so you're
going to get a deal done for all the right reasons.
But I want to tell you something. It is ridiculous. Everyone knows what the pieces of the deal have to be. And the fact that Boehner is sitting with the president, and the president has made his position public, and I was very glad that he issued a pretty clear, tough statement. I'm hoping they can get together.
What are they really negotiating? Because it seems that you don't have to be, Kreskin to read between the lines, that rates are going to go up for the top end. And it seems to me, and tell me if I have it wrong, that both of them are trying to help the other save face. The president's going to say, listen, I won't make it 39.6 for the top end. Maybe it doesn't even start at 250. But I need some revenues from the top 2%. Boehner's going to give on that. We all seem to agree, and certainly Republicans in growing numbers seem to agree. Does entitlement reform have to be on the table, specifically Medicare, before the end of the year? Or are we going to do this thing piecemeal and just work out the taxes before the end of the year and we deal with entitlements next year?
Look, first of all, it's not just the taxes issue, and I'm on record, as is Chuck Schumer, because in this district, a lot of people don't feel so rich at $250. So I'm on record saying $1 million and above, as is Chuck Schumer. So maybe we'll come there in between. The important thing is the president has made it clear that 250 and below should get their tax cut continued. And frankly, the Republicans know that they're going to be blamed if nothing happens and you get to January and suddenly, we'd like to say middle-class people, those who are making $250 and below suddenly have a tax increase, the Republicans will be blamed, and that won't be good. Now to entitlements. Yeah. I happen to think there are plenty of places you can get the money. You can get it from farm subsidies.
Before you do that, can you tell me what, when you say the money, what is the number you're talking about? Because the president, we're talking $1.6 trillion over 10 years, right? And the Republicans are using half that number. What's the target you guys got to identify?
$1.6 trillion, and now there may be some fudging of the numbers, but no one is going to allow a sequester. No one is going to allow us to go over to the cliff and get tough, real, serious cuts, either in the social programs, which I'm going to have a fit over, or in the defense spending. And frankly,
but how do you get there if you don't?
Well, you've heard from enough economists who've made it clear that if you let this sequester take place, it'll really have a negative impact on the economy. But you mentioned the entitlements. Look, I have felt for a long time, and I've said this publicly, you shouldn't be touching Social Security. You can always go after fraud, waste, and abuse, and Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. But if you start messing with those programs, and even in Medicare, if you means test, which sounds reasonable to a lot of people, you make that an anti-poverty program. The reason Medicare is so strong is everyone is part of it. And that is what is key. And you're really shifting your costs to other insurance programs. So I am hoping that we can get a deal that will be talking about the middle class tax cuts, keep those going. I'm not sure where the number is going to be. Someplace either 250, 500, maybe $1 million. I doubt it. It'll probably be somewhere in between. But the most important news this week is that Boehner and the president are sitting in the room, and the president has laid out his plan. By the way, included in his plan was stimulus. I have been a strong supporter of investments in infrastructure because that's how you create jobs. More people are working, and there's more money that is going out to be part of the whole budget deal.
Where do we get to $1.6 trillion, though, is still...
If you're asking about the negotiating dynamic as a part from the merits of the case, this is just what happens, and I think to the good in Albany. The leadership sits around, and they don't say, come on, I need a little help here, John, or Obama, can you throw me a few bucks here? They are talking to each other like grown-ups, which is new, and they're talking in generalities, but signaling the place where they can meet. What they're both thinking about is whether they can deliver the votes for what the compromise is. Can Boehner get his crazies? Can Obama deliver the needle
lowers?
You
see, I think
that's
the easy part, like I know you're there, but I think the easy part is the tax portion, which is to say nobody wants to raise rates in the bottom 98%, and the Republicans aren't suicidal to even push for that. They're even conceding that they got to raise revenues in the top end. But I guess my question I keep coming back to, Congresswoman, is that the only thing we're going to figure out before Christmas? Or are we going to also talk about where you're going to find the other revenues in terms of savings?
But there are other issues there. The AMT, the ultimate minimum tax, kills my constituents here. We have to resolve that. The docs fix. You go ask doctors who are waiting to see those numbers change. Or the estate tax. It's been brought up to $5 million. If it goes down to $1 million, I worry about how many people are going to be pushed over the cliff.
But you're going the wrong way. We got to find savings here, and we're talking about rightful.
You can't guess at to what they're doing. They're structuring. Staffs are meeting. They're giving them menus of choices. It'll all happen. Don't worry.
Are you so convinced?
that a deal's going to happen? I'm convinced the deal's going to happen. But when it comes to the entitlements, I mean, here's the deal. We heard so much during the Republican primary about these radical right-wing Republicans won't even accept $1 in tax increases for $10 in spending cuts. There's a reason why they won't. And shame on the candidates in my party for not explaining. But the reason is, it's like Charlie Brown in the football. Cuts to spending in Washington never occur. Congress is always happy to take the revenue from the people. But in terms of reforming and cutting spending and entitlements, it doesn't happen.
I voted for the Budget Control Act, $1.5 billion in cuts. I voted for it.
And what year was that, ma'am?
This year.
Okay. Well,
2012. I'll send it to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Right?
Count members of Congress, especially on the Republican side, skeptical. So, to your question, if they are going to only deal with the revenue side and not the entitlement or the spending side, there better be an ironclad. Oh, they absolutely are singing that. They're saying let's not have tax rates increase on the middle class, and then we'll figure everything else out on the back end.
That is not the position the president has taken. The president has made it clear that it needs a balanced approach. What about balance? Don't you understand?
So you think the president's going to be bending over backwards to make sure he cuts spending?
I didn't say bending over backwards.
I have already voted for $1.5 billion in cuts to spending.
Richard, can I just ask the Congresswoman one quick question?
Of course.
What I think the common person is trying to figure out here, I think, and you've been predicting that the rates wouldn't for a while go to the top rate, or you've been mentioning this for some time, and it looks like that's where it's going to play out. But here's the question that I have, Congresswoman. Why this alarmist attitude in terms of why does we have to wait so long on every decision where Americans are panicked, and you don't know if your unemployment's going to be cut, you don't know if this benefit's going to be cut? Why does it come down to the 11th hour on every decision?
Because, first of all, Speaker Boehner has to deal with not quite 87 Tea Party people. He lost a couple, and maybe he'll lose some more. But I remember the days when you had Bob Michael, and we used to sit down and we used to work things out. In fact, on my subcommittee, Foreign Operations, I have a moderate Republican, Kay Granger. We've been called the odd couple. We write our bill together, and if there are differences of opinion, we work it out. But Speaker Boehner has people chomping at his rear, and it's very difficult. It is very difficult for him to compromise, and that's why he's right now, I don't know if he's doing it today, but this week he was in the White House in private meetings with the president trying to work things out, because you can work things out.
Let's keep this conversation. I'll let you get the first word on the Gian-Carlo right after the break, though, if I could. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Congressman Lowy, not just about the cliff, but also her new gig here. She was already, as they say, a cardinal, but now literally one of the 5 most influential members of the Democratic Congress here. We're going to get into that and also a lot more, including one of her favorite people, Hillary Clinton, after this.